1 year later, do I think the C5 Corvette is still the ultimate sports car bargain? This is my 2000 C5 Corvette, and I bought this American Beauty just over a year ago. In that time frame, I've had some ups, I've had some downs, but I'm here to give you my honest review on this vehicle. How do I like it? How has it been? And if I had the chance to buy this vehicle over again, would I change anything? Let's dive right into it. But you're probably curious why I chose to go with the C5 Corvette over everything else. I do have a full video breaking down why I went with the C5 Corvette over everything else that will be linked down in the description. But to give you guys the Cliff Notes version, my original idea was to get a project car, not only for the channel, but for myself to enjoy as well. I was really looking for the most bang for buck value, something that had a little bit more headroom, something that I can do more performance modifications to, make it even faster and make it more capable. I wanted something that I can take from day one into the canyons and it can still feel fine. I could do autocrossing, but then I can also build off of that platform, make it even faster, and something that I can enjoy for the most part from day one. And one of the biggest things I wanted was rear wheel drive. I've already had a Miata in the past. I didn't want to do that again. Looking at more JDM vehicles, but to get a good example of some of those vehicles, the price range that they were in were above what the C5 Corvette was. My preference was to get a manual, but that wasn't the deal breaker for me, which I also did a video on that. That'll be linked down in the description as well. But if you do any type of search online, you'll see on any forums and any videos, everyone is saying the same thing. The C5 Corvette really gives you the most bang for your buck. It really checks off all of the boxes that you really want when it comes down to a project car or a car that you want mostly just for performance. Now, we can't really talk about this vehicle without talking about the price range that I got this thing for. After I knew I wanted a C5 Corvette, I knew I wanted a running and driving vehicle. It didn't have to be perfect, but it had to be running, driving, and I could do a couple things too. In the SoCal area, trying to find a manual C5 Corvette, they were inside of the 17 to 18 to 19K range, but looking at automatics, they were a lot cheaper. Manual was definitely my preference. I wanted a manual car, but it wasn't the deal breaker for me. I figured if I could save 5 to 6 G's off of the purchase price, I could put that money into the vehicle and do other modifications to it. I wasn't really too picky on any of the interior bits or any of the interior features. I knew I just wanted the black hatchback C5 Corvette. If it was manual, great. If it was automatic, that would be fine. After looking at a couple vehicles, this one that I came up with was in the 12 to 13K range. For sure, this vehicle wasn't perfect, but during the initial test drive, the vehicle worked fine. It started right up. It drove great. It drove honestly straight. It still felt powerful and quick, and there was no issues with shifting or anything like that. As far as drivetrain wise, this vehicle was definitely the route that I wanted. It did have the aftermarket K&N cold air intake, and it did have a Flowmaster exhaust. So I knew that some things were done to this car. This vehicle was driven, but besides for that, this vehicle was very stout, pretty much stock, and had all the initial things that I wanted. I could say, honestly, the positive things about this car is just the drivetrain. This thing feels so raw and so visceral every time I drive it. It still feels just amazing, and I can't stress that enough. Be the fastest thing in a straight line. The LS1 engine, now it's, in its stock form, other vehicles have left it behind. Even like my wife's Coyote inside of her Mustang, the LS2, the LS3s, and everything else like that. So yes, technology has advanced, but for the price range that you're getting this vehicle in, this thing still feels great. It still feels very stout, very rowdy as well. Every single time I take this vehicle out, it feels a tad bit special, more special than what it really is. Yes, it's a 20-plus-year-old Corvette, but still at the end of the day, it's still is a Corvette. I grew up in the era of JDM cars, especially a lot of people my same age range. We all love JDM cars. But for me, I realized I've actually owned a lot of American muscle cars. There's something about it. It's really that like price to horsepower range. You really get a lot for what you're paying for. And it's true with this thing. That is one of the like really great things about Corvettes, especially now, especially that the price for these things have dropped so much in this range. I think the C5 is that perfect range of price for what you get. You're really getting a pretty good bargain. Now, I've taken my car out to the canyons multiple times. That was one of the main things I wanted to do with this vehicle. Go out to the canyons, really drive this thing and have fun and do modifications, and then eventually get into autocrossing, and then hopefully graduate into track days. But I wanted to really learn this platform and really get back inside a rear-wheel drive sports car again. For doing that, this thing definitely fits that bill. Before we had this vehicle, we had previously my wife's Veloster N, I had a Focus RS, and then also currently we still have my wife's Mustang GT. We took all of those vehicles out into the canyons. I took my Focus RS out in the canyons all the time, to Andrews Crest Highway, up into Malibu. We took them out into the canyons a lot. But I can say this feels more secure, more planted. I feel like I can go a lot faster, have a much better pace. My Focus RS, I think, felt very quick, especially off of the line. Up in the top end, it kind of like died out slightly, but it was still very quick. The Veloster N, I think, was even quicker in the canyon, especially out in Malibu and that type of area where there's much more tighter, more technical roads. That thing really shined there. I feel like this is the best of both worlds. It is very quick when it comes down to straight line performance, straight line, like accelerating out of turn, big long straightaways on the highway. If you want to do highway pulls and stuff like that, this thing does that all day long. And it can still handle very well on smaller, tighter roads. So that's the reason why, like, I really wanted a Corvette, because I wanted something that I can learn more, learn the platform, and actually do autocrossing and actually try to build up my own skills more and more. This LS1 engine is still very stout. Is it the fastest thing in the world nowadays? No. Where you can get a German car, throw a tune on it, it's making 100 plus more horsepower. You know, it's not really that same type of vehicle, but the aftermarket support for the LS platform is well known. You can do plenty of things to your vehicle. Mechanically wise, the engine has been great. I mean, it is true. The reason why people LS swap literally everything. They typically work well, they typically hold up, and they're pretty good engines. I cannot believe I caught that on camera. My literal roof went flying off. I guess we will resume this in a minute. And let's talk about the bad things about this C5 Corvette. As you can see, this is kind of what it does most of the time. It kind of just sits here inside of the garage, mostly because it has a lot of electrical issues and just small little minor things that just keep adding up, that makes it more unreliable when it comes down to driving it more consistently. This vehicle hasn't left me stranded really, but I have been left inside some weird predicaments. For example, when we were on the highway coming back home, all of the lights on the dash and everything, it was losing power. I had to pull off of the highway, which doing that wasn't an ideal situation to be, put in. This vehicle has had some issues with starting up, and I know we've done a couple fixes for that. I've gotten the new ignition switch with a brand new key straight from GM. That took a while for them to get a key and a ignition switch for this vehicle. Changed out some fuses, changed out the battery, got different battery bolts. There's been a couple just issues with that it just keeps adding up. I've just pretty much learned to always drive with this vehicle, have a voltmeter, a jumper pack, jumper cables, and I also have the trickle charger that the car stays on pretty much 24/7, just to make sure that this thing has plenty of juice inside of the battery, because of these things just drain battery. Now, when I talk about these issues, they're not that big of a deal when you think about them isolated. It's just the fact that they all happen very frequently together, back to back. It's really becoming, literally almost every time I drive this vehicle, something happens. Something just unexpected happens where I'm like, oh, the car didn't start when I thought it was going to start. Oh, it seems like something is surging a little bit. Oh, even if, for example, which this is completely different, my exhaust from the rear broke. I do not know how that happened. I know that's totally a me issue, but it's just on top of everything. That was when I was testing the vehicle out to make sure everything was good, no more electrical issues. And then that just happened, which on one side of things, I understand it's a 20-plus-year-old vehicle, a GM vehicle that, let's be honest, these things were not made, especially the interior, that great. The drivetrain and everything else, wonderful. But the interior and even some of these electronic components were not made the greatest. Yeah, there's going to be some issues, but it's just the fact that they happen so frequently and so often. It's starting to really add up. It's really making me not necessarily doubting the car, but I don't drive the vehicle as much because of, I know anytime I drive it, it's going to be much more of a commitment. Just knowing that, okay, cool, I got to bring everything with me. Where are we going? Will I have service just in case something happens? Can I get the car back? Am I going to be stopping and going, like having to get out of the car? That means more chances of the car not starting if I'm somewhere. So it really this car becomes much more of a taking it to the canyons, taking it to a location where I don't turn the car off. I just drive it, enjoy it, bring it back, plug it back up to the trickle charger. So there has been some negative things with that. Even talking to some other C5 Corvette owners, I was even talking to some other guy who literally did an engine swap on his, but his vehicle still drains batteries and he's having some electrical issues as well. I didn't get a chance to really ask him, do they change out any of the wiring or is the same stock wiring harness or anything like that, but I know for him though, he said I think they went to a LS3 engine. He's still having some electrical issues. It is what it is. There's going to be some issues. That's kind of with any vehicle, but I'm just finding for me personally, they are starting to add up. So, in conclusion, what are my final thoughts on the Corvette? I've honestly had a love-hate relationship with it. I would be lying if I were to say that I haven't thought about selling it multiple times, only because of my particular car has had a lot of issues, and it's just been small things here and there. It just keeps popping up. Literally in the clip that you saw with the roof flying off, that happened after I filmed all of the negative things about the Corvette. I wanted to take the car out and get some driving shots talking about the positive things about it. Luckily enough, I was filming, and also I had my in-laws that were following me behind. They got it on dash cam as well. It just seems like no matter what, every single time I take the car out, something happens. To be fair, just because I've had problems doesn't mean you're gonna have problems if you have a C5 Corvette. Same thing with the Focus RS. Before getting that, I've seen a lot of people saying they had problems with the head gasket, and all honestly, that was a more isolated incident where only a certain batch of cars had that problem. A lot of people were complaining about it in the forums. When I had my car, I had no issues. So I take a lot of that with a grain of salt. Just because I have problems with something doesn't necessarily mean you will, and vice versa. For me personally, my car, I've just had a lot of little issues. I could have bought a more clean example of a C5, but I wanted one that was going to be a driver's car. It was driven and not perfect, so if something happened to it, I wouldn't feel the worst about it. That falls into the same category as buying a C4 versus the C5. You can buy a really clean C4, but at that point you're going into the C5 price range of vehicle. Same thing with the C5. I could have gotten an even cleaner version of a C5, but then you're dipping into the C6 type of price range. So really for me, it truly is a love-hate relationship. I love the car, I've learned a lot, and really just owning the car, it's opened up my eyes to a whole different platform, diving into the forums, diving into other people's videos, learning more and more what other people have done, problems that they have. So for that, I really have enjoyed it. And honestly, when the car works great. Even just driving it yesterday for the first time and like, wow, on the highway, the drive is still fun, the car is still nice. It's just small little issues come up here and there. But with that being said, would I choose this vehicle again? Honestly, I don't know. A part of me still wants to either sell it, move on to something different, or maybe keep it. I'm still in between. If I were to, probably would be moving on to a C6, but we don't know for sure yet. But yeah, honestly, this has been a really good learning experience having this car. If you're looking to own a C5 Corvette, you really want to check out this video right here. This was the time we took it out into the canyons, really took this thing and really wrung it out and really got a chance to see what it could do. after first purchasing the vehicle. Check this video out. We'll see you in the next one.